mentioned in our textbook. Many dance historians credit Isadora Duncan with being the first dancer to present modern dancing to the public. She moved in a way that seemed natural to her, which included hopping, skipping, running, and movement from the solar plexus. She was born in San Francisco, California. She was an American dancer whose teaching and performances helped to free ballet from its conservative restrictions. She was the first to raise interpretive dance into the status of creative art. In a remarkably short space of time, she became a cult figure, performing barefoot and in a loose, flowing tunic. She gave her audiences a highly individual and subjective vision of dance. This is a quote from our textbook which says, "Today, what is often taught and choreographed in modern dance is an eclectic type of technique, meaning that instructors and choreographers have drawn from the many traditional, postmodern, and contemporary techniques that fall under the broad heading of modern dance to develop their own personal styles." So in this presentation, we will learn how Isadora Duncan brought that into life. She used her own personal style when creating modern dance in her performances. Isadora's early life. Isadora Duncan was born in San Francisco, California, like we previously mentioned, on May 26, 1877. She was the youngest of four. Her parents were divorced by 1880, and her mother, Dora, moved with her children to Oakland, where she struggled to make ends meet as a piano teacher. Isadora was brought up in a genteel poverty by their mother. Her earliest public appearances in Chicago and New York City met with little success, and at the age of 21, she left the United States to seek recognition abroad. Duncan toured widely, and at one time or another, she founded dance schools in Germany, Russia, and the United States, though none of these survived. Okay, in this slide, we're going to talk about Duncan's contribution to modern dance. In 1902, her debut performance in Hungary was a sensation and was sold out for 30 days. Shows across Europe followed with a mixture of success and opposition to her new approach. But it didn't faze her, and by 1905, she had established her own dance school in Berlin, subsidized by her tours. The concept of freedom of movement not only meant taking command of your own space for her, but also your sexuality and agency. According to Guillermo Marquez in 1988, she'd raise her legs forwards with bent knees, the foot without extension of the instep, the head tilted, the arms were extended freely without any defined position. There were no poses in movement. Movement was basically undulating and fluid, round and more symmetric than asymmetric. She doesn't base her art on a search for physical skills, but on a connection between her own thought and feelings with the movement they generate. For Duncan, dance is an expressive result of personal life. She found several schools dedicated to teaching, as previously mentioned, her dance philosophy to groups of young girls. Many say she leaves no direct legacy. There are currently groups of women who perform and teach according to her style and ideas. Okay, Isadora's barefoot dancing. In our chapter reading on our textbook, we learned that ballet technique and pointy shoes were too confining for Isadora Duncan. The history of barefoot dancing in the United States begins with Isadora Duncan, who shocked early 20th century audiences by refusing to wear shoes when she performed. Duncan's bare feet were a rebellious act, representing her desire to push dance beyond the rigid confines of classical ballet. After just a few minutes of one ballet class, Duncan knew that the romantic ideal of the ballerina opposed her beliefs. The unnatural way in which it forced her to twist her body and squeeze herself into painful shoes led her to explore and express the natural symmetry of human bodies. Isadora's love affair with Greek. Isadora Duncan studied the Greek and Roman antiquities at the British Museum, sitting for hours in front of the artworks and imagining how they might move. The imagery in Duncan's choreography was informed by her study of Greek and Renaissance art. Isadora worked to achieve the natural, weighted, strong movements of the Greek figure. She was determined to succeed and left with boundless spirit to Europe and Russia, where she met and inspired some of the greatest artists of her time. She danced as a soloist, but always imagined herself to be the Greek chorus, reflecting the voices of nature and humanity. Between 1904 and 1907, Duncan lived and worked in Greece, Germany, Russia, and Scandinavia. Duncan built a home in Kapanos, Greece, and traveled widely, touring the South America throughout Europe, Russia, and Egypt. After her debut performance in Budapest in 1902, which was a critical success, Isadora decided to visit Greece to follow her life's ambition and step herself in Greek art and architecture. Lastly, we will end our presentation talking about Isadora Duncan's legacy, the Duncan technique. The dance of Isadora Duncan is a crafted study and artistic rendering of the human soul. The source of all movement stems from the solar plexus, which we actually talked about in our textbook, located in the center of the torso between the ribs. The Duncan dance actual movement vocabulary is based on natural and organic movements, based on the free flow and organic movements of humanity's universal activity. We also previously mentioned them, which were walking, running, kneeling, reclining, skipping, or leaping. It also includes movements derived from European social dance, such as the waltz, polka, and mazurka. Isadora studied the how of all movements, how the weight is shifted from one leg to another while walking, what happens when lifting the leg from the ground, reclining, rising from the ground, and leaping. Isadora said that her legs expressed the rhythm and her upper body, the melody. The result is that what the audience sees can appear easy, even though years of rigorous study are required to achieve the effects. She used wave motions and articular forms throughout her dance to demonstrate her philosophy that movement comes from within, like rays emanating from the sun.